welcome to another episode. It's Average Sports by your average guys, Eric and Ty.
That's right. We're here. Another week.
Yeah, we're actually doing this together, Eric. In the same room.
I know,
Nice.
it's pretty great.
We need to do this more often.
It does. It makes it a lot easier to get this thing done.
Well, once again, welcome to this episode. It's episode 10 of season 2. Thanks for joining us. If you're new to the show, we're just going to talk about sports, all things in an average way.
Oh, yeah.
What's happening? So let's catch you up. And actually, before we do, what are we not talking about, Eric?
Well, I've been restricted from talking about Daniel
Not
Jones,
happening.
quarterback drafted by the Giants, if you listen to last episode.
Yeah, go back to
Been
it
enough.
and just time them. I think it's like 5 minutes. Just
But
spinning your wheels.
there's definitely something I'm restricting you from talking about, too, which is the what?
Tiger effect.
Yeah, you're not allowed to talk about Tiger Woods.
Not
ever.
doing it. No.
No.
Forget it. But we got lots of other sports stuff to talk about here through the entire episode. How about some NHL playoffs?
Oh, my God. It's been great.
It's been great. Now, I
there's-
will say the Eastern Conference Finals not shaping up to anyone, unless you're a Boston fan. I think they're walking away with this one. As
Yeah,
we're
they
recording right now, they're 2-0 in the game 4, which of course they're leading 3-0. So
Yeah, it
looks like they're
it's
Stanley
gonna
Cup
be over.
bound. Yeah, the only good
least
thing
for
about
Carolina,
I could say about the Carolina Hurricanes is their uniforms. Ooh, they look good, sharp.
I love the black.
The black on black and the new
with the
sweater
hurricane,
logo.
with the hurricane flags, I dig it.
I like it
It's
a lot
great.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, some of the other stuff that we're gonna just quick recap. Obviously, I know lots of people tuned in not only to the Kentucky Derby but heard about the disqualification there. So if you hadn't already heard that news, that was first time ever that the winner, technically the winner of the Kentucky Derby, then got disqualified for changing lanes.
Do you think that's a big deal?
Yeah, I definitely think it's a big deal for safety reasons that, if you change lanes and the horse clips each other, the horses are going to go down, and we know what happens when horses fall like that. They end up putting them down. So, much less the jockeys themselves, I think, could get really, really hurt. Some other things, too, for me, Don Cherry, the terrible broadcaster on Canadian hockey, doubled down on calling the Carolina Hurricanes a bunch of jerks and being buffoons, and yet this guy wears floral patterned suits to the games, and this guy's out there calling other people jerks and buffoons. Don Cherry, go screw yourself.
Wow.
And then the Twins and Red Sox are turning it around. They are really
Twins
getting
look
hot.
for real.
Twins look hot in a division with really only one other good team. And Boston, who was really towards the bottom, has heated up quite a bit. So they're turning around like a lot of people thought.
And lastly, on the other side of the NHL Western Conference, which is the other side, then the Eastern, St. Louis and San Jose, that's shaping up to be a good series. Game 3 ended in overtime. Lots of to do about that one, but still entertaining, I would say.
Yeah, lots of controversy in that one, but good series so far.
All right, yes or no? Was it a hand pass?
You goddamn right it was.
Ooh. Jumping into our topic for the episode, it's a little bit more of, a good debate here, a discussion, something worth considering as we just progress through the sport of football over the next several years. And really, this could take 10 to 20 years to really develop into anything, but we're going to talk about football participation at the high school level. What could that mean for the sport, upwards even to the professional level? So really it's just about noticing, and you can just Google type this, search it for anything about decline in high school and participation, how many athletes there are out there in the sport. There is strong numbers showing that just not as many kids are signing up to play football for whatever number of reasons, either concussion or just interest in other sports. What does this mean for the sport in total? Do you have a take on this?
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and one that has definitely been covered quite drastically on some other programs, whether it be something like Sports Center or like 30 for 30s that I know people have seen about it. But there's a lot of controversy centered around this sports with the head injuries and kind of what's going on with that, with then parents not wanting their kids to participate in this sport, especially at a youth level. And, what does that mean for the future of NFL football? Because they're the only pro league at the moment. You can consider XFL or even what the American Alliance of Football did as well, too. But really, we're talking about just any professional level of football. But is the decline in participation numbers really going to make a difference in the quality product that's on the field? And some of the numbers that support it, like you were saying, is 2008 was the year that football peaked with 1.1 million participants in high school football.
That's a lot of kids.
That's a lot of kids. And they have declined about 7%, which pulls them down to just over 1 million. If you're able to do the math, fortunately I have a spreadsheet here in front of me that did it for me. But one of the things that's
you're not
really
that smart.
interesting, no, again, this is average, guys. One of the things that's great about this is that, across all the other sports, we see major increases in participation from that same 2008 mark. The biggest leap across all of them, and they're actually very close, is soccer and cross country. Now, both of them, soccer has about 600,000 participants in high school and about 400,000 for cross country. So, that doesn't make up the whole difference there. But that's a huge increase in those sports over that time frame.
Yeah, and soccer makes a lot of sense. Has the most opportunity to gain ground, where football is just out of all the sports that are kind of the highest participation, track, field, basketball, baseball, soccer. You're looking at football is the only one really declining. So that has to mean something. However, take the caveat away is that football is still the most popular. Kids are playing that sport still a lot. But for the rate that it is declining, looking at about 6.6, this is according to a Washington Post article, percent in the last 10 years, that we have dropped to that 1.1 or 1.2, or about where you were talking about, Eric, and then down almost sub 1 million across the U.S. I think what the sport might eventually wind up doing, and I think that's more about the topic here, is where is the sport going to go then outside of the NFL, and what should we expect to see it from on a collegiate level, and then, of course, what we're talking about here at the high school level is what do we expect to see football become? And I think it's going to be much more of a regional thing, almost like the way lacrosse is, which, by the way, is on a real strong increase. So you're going to see these pockets of geographic areas in the country that still you have a lot of kids playing football. Like Florida seems to be doing just fine. And I'm sure Texas isn't going anywhere either.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point there about those two states in particular. But one of the things that's pretty important to remember is, these are high school numbers, so we'll just say 1 million to make it easy. But 1 million high school participants in football, and in professional football, there's 1,696 jobs. That's 53-man rosters across 32 teams. Is it really going to make a major impact in the actual quality if you lose 100,000 people, which is really what
Probably
we're talking
not,
about?
right?
I don't think so. In the future, if they continue to lose 100,000 people over the next 10 years and maybe plateau at
it would take a long time.
I would see that would be an issue.
Yeah.
I think at some point they'll probably bounce back. Their highest was in 2008, as we've been saying. But we'll see what happens over the next couple of years. But I think it's important to know that there are avenues of sports that are gaining a lot of popularity here in the U.S. Lacrosse being one, soccer being a huge one as well too. Whether it be for the men's and women's, national teams doing really well. Well, maybe not this past year for the men not qualifying, but over the past 10 years, we've been in the World Cup. It's been, an increase in the sport here with MLS and things like that we see those other sports starting to take off some of those, chip away at some of the other bigger sports. Is it really going to make a impact on the NFL? Probably not, but they're chipping away maybe at even players that just have a better skill set suited for those sports. But one more thing, too, to point out is, we were talking about some increases and decreases, and you mentioned Florida. Florida's added 77 high school football programs, Tennessee 35, Georgia 38 over the last 10 years. But it's also noteworthy that there's been a decrease in 46 programs in Ohio, 51 in Oklahoma, and 36 in Iowa. So it seems to be staying relatively flat, with some states increasing and some decreasing.
And I think that's the big takeaway here. We're looking at a total U.S. average that over in the last 10 years, we're seeing this pretty significant decline, but one that may not have any strong impact over the sport on what it is and its identity, but one at least worth noting. So there you go. Take from it what you will. We're riding right along here on this episode and riding right into Who You Got portion of the show, which this one I came up with. It's just a little bit different. It could create, I feel like this has the makings of stirring a lot of heated discussion. At the same time, it's not my goal here. I'm just wanting to look at athletes who are at the professional level. What sport or which athletes of which sport are most ready to jump in and transition into another sport at a professional level? I think you see it all the time. College athletes come in and play baseball or something, and you hear an announcer talk about, oh, that guy could have been drafted in football or basketball, and he decided baseball. Like, what an athlete. But for the sport itself, what sport would give you the skill set to transition into what sport? What would you pick?
Yeah, I think that's pretty interesting when you break it down to, what sport offers the best skill set at a professional level of those group of athletes that could transition into something different. If I had to pick one sport that I think could transition into some other sports relatively easily, and I'll keep it somewhat mainstream here, but it would be basketball players. I think a majority of basketball players would be quite successful in the NFL, mostly as receivers or tight ends. But some of them, could be decent running backs and things like that. They have the size, they have the height that they could be completely dominant in the NFL. We don't know what their hands are like as far as catching, but just sheer physical, athletic size. I mean, they would dominate in that sport, or move over to something, a little bit different. I think baseball would be really tough, but maybe a sport.
I feel like football, though, I'm just going to interject here, that football is going to be the easiest sport for anyone to at least fill in and perform at some kind of level. Mm-hmm. We're not talking about all-stars here and how well you might do it, but are you going to grasp the sport and perform pretty well? I think this is not an unheard of scenario where a student has never played football before, and they, just because of their sheer athletic ability, they could just learn the sport. So I think that can happen, no problem. I think that is interesting, the parallel between a basketball player being able to catch ball on fast break and going in for a layup or alley-oop. I mean, that kind of coordination, that's pretty good. I would think even also it would translate the other way, that a receiver could make a pretty good basketball player if they could shoot. That would be tough. I think that basketball might be the hardest sport to transition into. And what basketball might transition into, in my opinion, they would be very limited. To me, I think hockey players. Hockey players could go play so much stuff. When I am watching the hockey playoffs right now and see a player just bat the stick, or the puck with their stick, of course, just out of midair, right at the blue line, just blocking it. Whoa, yeah, they could go play baseball tomorrow, I'm sure.
What you're talking about, guys, go watch Joe Pavelski playing in the series against the Blues. That dude is the best at deflections in front of the net with how he's able to get a stick on a puck that's moving 89 miles an hour at him. It's incredible.
And then with their skating ability, I mean, they could also go be figure skaters. Eric has laughed at me about this earlier in the show, before the show.
I was laughing at you because you misheard me.
I think figure skating is a total sport, and those guys could actually go do that. They could play baseball during the day and go for the gold in the evening.
Yeah, I was thinking more that skaters would be
and
great
then
as
fight you.
Downhill racing.
Okay.
Downhill speed skiing. It's an edge control sport in hockey. It's the exact same in skiing. So they'd be great at that.
Let us know what you guys think on Who You Got as far as a professional sport out there and what would transition best into another sport. We'd love to hear about it and your thoughts. Hit us up on AVG Sports Facebook.
Yeah.
What's the best place to go, Eric?
Yeah, AVG Sports on our Facebook page. You guys can also send me an email, avgsports@gmail.com would be cool too.
There it is.
But Facebook page is the best place to interact with us.
Yeah, hit us up. Eric, you hear that?
I hear that. You hear that? Oh, man.